But what I really say to them is like, do you want to be the leader of a hopeful organization or a hopeless organization? And
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Empowering Women podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Baumgartner. And on behalf of Empowering Women in Industry and our incredible founder, Charlie Carruth, thank you for being here and for continuing to build this community where we connect, educate, and empower women. Because when women support women, we really do rise together. Now, today's episode is one that feels especially timely. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, a time when many of us pause to talk about burnout, balance, and well being. But if we're being honest, for many people, work, it still feels like a constant race. Emails coming in faster than we can answer them, calendars stacked from morning to evening. And somewhere along the way, our own well being, well, it quietly slips to the bottom of the to do list. Sound familiar? Yeah, it does for me as well. The good news is that the conversation around mental health at work has changed dramatically over the past decade. Leaders are now talking about it more openly than ever before. But knowing something needs to change and actually changing how we lead and live are two very different things. And that's where today's conversation, well, it gets really interesting. Because today's guest challenges a powerful assumption. She says the thing that many of us think, we think of it really as a feeling. It's actually a leadership skill. Her name is Jen Fisher. Jen is a global expert on workplace well-being and the former Chief Wellbeing Officer at Deloitte, where she helped one of the world's largest organizations rethink how leaders support people, prevent burnout, and build cultures where humans, not just productivity, can thrive. She's also the author of the book, Hope is a Strategy. And I can say from personal experience, it is a must read. In today's conversation, we explore why hope, it isn't passive optimism or wishful thinking. Real hope is active. It's intentional. And according to Jen, it's something leaders can build one step, one decision, and sometimes one very deep breath at a time. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, running a little too fast, or wondering how we can create healthier workplaces without burning ourselves out in the process, this episode is absolutely for you. So let's dive in, and I will see you on the other side. So, hello, friends, and welcome to the Empowering Women podcast. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I think it's a powerful reminder that well-being, it is not a nice to have, it is a must have, especially in the way we lead, work, and live. And I think today's guest, you're going to love her. She's going to help us rethink all of it. Jen Fisher is a global expert on workplace well-being, leadership, and the future of work. She's the author of the book, Hope is the Strategy, and I think you can see that behind her if you're watching us on YouTube. She was also the first ever Chief Wellbeing Officer at Deloitte, where she helped shape one of the world's largest professional services firm, how they think about human sustainability, culture, and burnout. And it really brings one of my favorite topics into full view, human-centric leadership, and how you can do that at scale. So today we're talking about why hope is more than a feeling. It's a leadership muscle we all need to strengthen. And I'm so excited because this conversation is going to be honest, uplifting, and exactly what May was made for. So Jen, I'm so excited to welcome you to the Empowering Women podcast.
thank you so much for having me. And can I just bring you around with me everywhere to introduce me like that? Because that was awesome.
Yeah, you could take this clip and save it and
Yes,
say, "Here's what I
please
want you to
introduce me
say."
like this. Yes. Thank you so much.
So as I mentioned, Jen, on the intro, your career spans leadership, well-being, and the future of work. But every meaningful journey, it has a moment that changes us, or maybe multiple
Yeah.
moments. So what I want you to tell our audience is what part of your own story lit the spark for your focus on hope, well-being, and how we work.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right in that there's probably more than one moment. I think the standout moment for me really was, going back about 11 years ago when I experienced, a pretty extreme case of burnout, if you will. And if you think back 11 years ago, we weren't having these conversations in the workplace.
Nope.
And we weren't talking about well-being. We weren't talking about burnout, especially in very, high performing, high grind, high pressure industries, of which I feel like every industry is now, but especially management consultancies and professional
Mm.
services.
Yeah, and that one and probably the financial industry come to mind as
Financial
being some
industry,
really tough ones. Yep.
legal industry. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them. Healthcare. I think work is just hard right now. Right? We could
Yeah,
we could
true.
check them all off the list, but we just weren't talking about these things in this way. And I think also um, even more so as women, we were always told, don't bring your problems to work, don't show your emotions at work, don't cry, don't get too angry, don't do this, don't, I mean, this long list of what you shouldn't do. And so I knew I was struggling. I was having a really hard time, and we can kind of talk about what those symptoms looked like for me, although they're different in other people. But I was afraid to ask for help because I looked around and everybody seemed to be fine because that's what we do, right? We continue to show
Yep.
up when, underneath we're like the duck, frantically paddling. Up until the point that I couldn't anymore. And people are always like, well, did you know? Or what's the best way to know? And for me, it was really people that knew me and people that cared about me, in particular, my husband, would say things. But even then, he would say, like, I don't think you're okay, or something's going on. But we don't listen to our spouses. We don't think they know what they're talking about. And so
You're like,
so
oh
I
yeah, yeah, whatever.
I kind of dismissed it, and I just kept telling myself, if I just push through, if I continue to push through, if I get through this project, if I get through this, if I get through that, I'll have time, or I'll feel better, or I'll take care of myself. And that never came, until the point of, I woke up one morning and I could physically get myself out of bed and I could make coffee and sit there and sip it. But that was the extent of which I was engaging in life or work in any meaningful way. And that forced me to to take a step back and to seek out professional help
Mm.
and do the work that needed to be done. And I had to take a leave of absence. A story that I tell in the book is actually also a conversation that I had with my leader, who is an incredible mentor and friend to date to now. But back then, she kind of sat me down and said, Jen, you're not okay. And what's worse is, you've convinced yourself and everyone else that this is what okay looks like. And so she
Mm.
saw through all of that. Of course, I freaked out and was like, "Oh my gosh, she thinks I'm weak. I can't cut it here." All of
Mm.
those things, that the stories that we tell ourselves in our mind. I now know, looking back all those years, that for me, I say that, even as hard as that was, she saw me and she believed in me and she knew that there was something wrong. And she said, I'm here and I have your back and I want to support you. And so when I think about, and I know we're going to get into the topic of hope, but when I think about hope in my life, that was really the
Mm.
first moment of hope, because it was truth. And it
Yeah.
was
But I
admitting
mean,
that I
kudos
couldn't.
to that leader because
Absolutely.
a lot of leaders will notice it and just not say anything because maybe they don't feel comfortable. I don't know. It could be a litany of reasons, but
Well, and we're talking about Mental Health Awareness Month, right? That is the number one thing that I talk with leaders about when they're like, when I notice somebody struggling, I'm afraid to say something. Number one, because what if I say the wrong thing? Number two is, what if I make it worse? Or, so I think there's just a general discomfort in, like, how do I approach this when I know that somebody, or
mm,
when I believe that somebody might not be okay? Because we don't want to make it worse. The truth is you can't make it worse, and it's
mm,
better to say something than nothing at all. Because when somebody's struggling, especially with their mental health,
mm.
they want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to know that there's somebody that's there for them.
Yeah,
So
can
I
see
tell
that.
people, look, it might always be a difficult conversation. Have it anyway. It's so
Yeah, it's
critically
so
important.
true.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the universalities of life is that people want to be seen, and I can see in a point of crisis where how that would even be amplified.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, speaking of your book is titled "Hope is the Strategy," which I think is a bold statement. People may not think that, but I think that's a bold statement in a world that loves tactics and tools. Um, when did you realize hope isn't quote unquote fluffy? It's really a powerful leadership skill.
yeah, so a couple of things. Number one, I keep hearing that about the title, which is great. It makes me smile because I chose that title specifically to push back on the norm that we've all heard that hope is not a strategy. I mean, how many times have we heard in movies and the corporate world and every aspect of our life, oh, hope is not a strategy. So I did that on purpose and for people that like, tools and measurements and ROI and all. And in the book, I provide tons of tools and ways to measure hope. And so, and I would say the other thing that I've been talking about with a lot of leaders that are like, come on, Jen, like really, like now first you wanted me to talk about well-being, now you want me to actually talk about hope. And I'm like, I don't care if you talk about hope. I want you to behave and lead in a way that inspires hope. But what I really say to them is like, do you want to be the leader of a hopeful organization or a hopeless organization? And right now, unfortunately, a lot of people are feeling hopeless in the world and
Mm,
in the world of work. And so, for me, it was recovery from burnout. When I sought out professional help, when I went to therapy, my therapist actually had me do hope related exercises. And so he had me actually read C.R. Snyder's work. So C.R. Snyder is the researcher, kind of the godfather of hope theory. And so
mm,
what his research says is that hope requires three things. So hope is a very specific and intentional and clear way of setting goals. So what he says is real hope requires three things. It requires a goal and clarity around that goal. It can't be just some, you know, I'm going to win, I hope to win the lottery type thing. That's not real hope. So you need a real goal, you need clarity around it. Then you need to identify pathways or, employ possibility thinking. And so what are all the ways in which I
mm.
can reach this goal? Not just one way, because typically what happens, and I think anybody in the corporate world that has to set annual goals will relate to this. You set your goals at the beginning of the year, you go back at the end of the year because you have
Yeah.
to do your self assessment and you're like, this doesn't even make any sense anymore because so much has changed. Well, real hope would tell you, like, first of all, you need to regularly revisit those, but you have to have multiple pathways in which you're going to reach that goal. So if one pathway is blocked or there's a barrier, you can just switch and be like, okay, that didn't work. That was interesting. What did I learn? I'm going to move to this pathway. And then finally, you have to have agency. So the ability to actually impact change. So
Mm.
real hope requires action. It's not, saying I hope I win the lottery, kicking your feet up and waiting for the numbers to come out on Friday night or Saturday night. I don't even know when they come out because I don't play the lottery. So
I don't either, so I can't help you there.
whenever they release the numbers. So that's not what, that's what real hope is. But I think for most of us, we've been kind of, taught that or believe that hope is kind of, whimsical or is wishful thinking. Like, yeah, it'd be great if I win the lottery, then I can quit my job and I don't have to work. I mean, that's kind of, that's out there. That's wishful thinking, but that's not what real hope is. And so that's why I say
Mm.
that hope is the strategy because it requires you to be really thoughtful and intentional and it requires you to take action. If you don't take action, then it's not real hope. It's kind of just positive,
It's sort of a
having a,
dream or a pipe dream, right? Like
yeah,
winning the
or even
lottery. I
just
mean,
like,
the odds are pretty against
yeah,
winning the lottery for most of us.
or even just like the whole notion around like, positive vibes only. Like there's the mindset of kind of positive thinking, which is great, but that's happens right here. That just requires you to think positively. It doesn't actually require you to take action towards a specific goal. And so really to me what hope is believing that tomorrow is better than today and taking action towards that better
Mhm.
tomorrow. And
Yeah,
so
I love the agency part of that because it puts the onus not on the world but on you, and it empowers you to move in some
yeah,
way.
and that's why the goal has to be clear and realistic. You can't set some goal that you have no ability to do anything about.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think you've done a TEDx talk on the future of work as well. So pivot in a little bit, and
Yep.
kudos to you because getting on the TEDx stage is not an easy thing to do. I think you talk about reimagining how we show up as humans at work, and I just cannot wait for this question. If leaders could change one mindset tomorrow to improve their mental health at work, what do you think it could be?
Look, gosh, there's so many.
We can pick more than one. I keep
I mean,
going.
I
We're all
think,
learning.
yeah, I mean, I think the biggest pet peeve I have is when leaders and all of the things that I talk about and all of the things that I talk about in my book are as a result of me doing things and learning the hard way or perhaps learning a different and better way. But one of the things that gives me like major cringe that like we need to change language and mindset about in the workplace is that people that work for your organization, that work for you and with you, are not assets. They are humans. So
Yeah,
how many?
I work in corporate America,
Yeah.
and one of the things, there's two words that I really don't like. Headcount is one,
Hmm.
and the second one is full-time equivalents or FTEs. I
Yeah,
do
that
not like
one.
either one of
Or
those words.
I come from the world of consultancy. We call people human capital, right? Like people
Yeah.
are they're not capital. They're humans. And so the reason I'm saying this is not to poke fun, but the mindset shift that needs to happen or that we need to get back to because or do differently. Maybe it's not about going backwards, but in a lot of ways we our world has become so fast and so digital and there's such cognitive overload happening at all times that we have forgotten that we are dealing with human beings. And as much as you might be dealing with or struggling, or as much as information is flowing to you, it's also flowing to them. And so we need as leaders, but as human beings, we need to stop and pause and
Mm,
remember that. And have that conversation like, hey, how are you really doing? Or thinking about taking a second. And in the book I talk about as leaders, things that we do that are hope builders and hope killers. And so
mm,
primarily, and it's not a semantics game, but primarily in how we communicate with each other, because actions matter but also words matter, especially in an increasingly virtual and digital world. People
yeah.
receive messages in the state that they're in, not necessarily in the state that you meant it. And so, when we say things in the workplace like, we value your opinion, or innovation, or I want you to bring me your creative ideas. I'm really interested in them. And then somebody brings us an idea and we say, I don't have time for that, or we don't have the bandwidth for that, or we tried that before and it didn't work, or and again, this comes from a place of experience, right? Like for me, I was
Yeah.
like, look, I'm a responsible leader. If we don't have the bandwidth for something, I'm going to tell somebody we don't have the bandwidth for, because I thought like, oh, let me be responsible and tell them, don't waste your time on this. We don't have time for it. But what you're really telling them is, I want you to bring you my ideas, but then I want you to bring me your ideas, but then when you bring them to me, I'm going to tell you, we don't have time. We tried it before. That's not how we do things here. I mean, we've all said it.
Yep, we have.
And again, I want to
Especially
reiterate,
because everybody's typically under some level of pressure at work. It differs, but everybody's got their own time delivery pressure at work.
absolutely. So just, I mean, simply kind of rethinking, taking that split second, that pause and saying, well, tell me more about what interests you about this idea, or what do you think is different, or given everything else we have going on, how do you think we can accomplish this?
Mm-hmm.
Put it back on them, right? You have this great idea. What are you thinking in terms of how we accomplish these things? And so, look, it this is what good leadership is, but we've gotten so consumed, we're so overwhelmed and so burdened. I've yet to meet a leader that tells me that they don't care about their people or that they don't care about the well-being of their people. Yet we're so overburdened and so overwhelmed that oftentimes the way that we show up is significantly impacting the people
Mm,
that work with
true.
us and for us.
Yeah,
So,
I think one of the biggest lessons I learned, and I can't for the life of me think of his name right now, but he was the starring role in the Black Panther movie.
uh,
And you would have never known, right? That's a superhero movie. Either
Bozeman, what's his first name? Isn't his last name Bozeman? Anyway,
yes,
it doesn't
Chadwick
matter.
Boseman. Thank
Yes,
you.
there we
Yes.
go.
Um,
Together, we put both of our brains
yeah.
together and we made it work.
Like you would have never known he was that sick. Like you looked at the movies and the way he showed up on the red carpet, you'd have never known that he was very ill with cancer. And what that taught me was you just never know with the person that you work even shoulder to shoulder with, maybe your work bestie, or I'll be really vulnerable. My mom and I had a tough conversation last night, and she had no idea some stuff I was going through that I wasn't sharing with her on purpose. And I think I try when somebody's really frustrating me, I try to take a step back and say, you don't know what that person
Yeah,
is facing personally or professionally.
yeah,
And you need to give them some grace to say that you don't understand what's behind the curtain.
yeah. And I would say 100%. And I would say you also need to turn that grace on yourself too, right? Because
Good
I
point.
think,
Yep.
like, look, we're all human, and so if you reactively respond to somebody, or you show up in a way that, later on you're like, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I said that. I can't, like, give yourself some grace. And one of the, like, I think there's several really important things that leaders can do and say that builds trust, that builds hope, that creates a culture of well-being is number one, I don't know the answer, but I believe in our ability to figure it out together.
Mm,
Number two, I didn't show up yesterday the way that I would normally like to, and I'm sorry, or I didn't sleep the night before, or I'm struggling with a few things personally. You don't have to just, if you want to disclose what they are, you can, but you don't have to. But just simply saying, like, hey, I have a lot going on in my personal life right now, and the way I showed up, I wasn't proud of that. That just allows people to know that you're human. And when I talk to people about this, they're like, like, really? Because aren't leaders supposed to be strong and inflappable, and never
mm-mm,
let them see you sweat, and
mm-mm.
check your emotions? And nobody wants to work for somebody like that.
No,
you
no,
know?
they don't. I mean, I have to admit, like, I broke down and got really emotional during a conversation with a team. And I had several people approach me afterwards and said,
Thank you.
thank you. Now we know that you're not some corporate
Yeah.
robot, so to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, nobody wants to work for a corporate robot. Nobody wants to work for somebody that believes that they have all the answers. Nobody wants to work for somebody that, puts this front up that they've never struggled with anything. I mean, like, we've all worked for that person, and none of us want to work for that person again.
No.
So don't become that person.
Well, that's a great transition to my next question. So, I think work is exhausting right now because I
Yeah.
think you're trying to do your job and honestly do it in a kind of a crazy context of the world that we live in. Um, I think burnout and anxiety and overload, I can feel it more. So now it sort of feels like pandemic a little bit. And I feel like it's becoming almost normalized. How do you think we can help people, either coworkers, team members, from just surviving to actually thriving again in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think um, as a leader, and I give in the book, I give a lot of examples of this, and a lot of case studies. But just number one, we were just talking about being human. Simply saying, the world is a hard place right now. I know that we are all experiencing, what's going on. Look, this is not a political statement. This is not
No.
taking sides, but just recognizing that everybody's human and everybody is experiencing whatever they're experiencing it, and acknowledging that. And then saying, like, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you think your workload is too much, like, come to me and let's have a conversation around, prioritizing things, or just proactively help people prioritize. Go through your own day and your own calendar. And, like, number one, I think as a leader, identify where you're a barrier. Like, is your team regularly waiting for you in order for them to continue their work?
Mm.
And what are some things that it would really help? We talked about agency and how important agency is to building hope. You know, what are some things that you need to start letting go of and letting your team take care of? Because
Whoa, that was a hard
it,
one. That's
it is,
one of my Achilles heels right
but
there.
that's better for you, and it's ultimately better for them, right? Because they're not always waiting for you, which sometimes can feel really frustrating. But you're telling them, like, hey, I believe in you, I trust you. And if you don't get it right, I've got your back, right? And
Yep.
so identify what are those things that you can let go of. What are the things that you can also stop doing? Like, what are the things that we're just spending time on? I give an example in the book of a leader who actually gave his team permission to, like, do an audit of all of their meetings and come back to him and tell him all the meetings they believe should be canceled. And,
I like
because
that.
the complaint was, we spend 8 hours a day in back to back to back meetings and calls, and then we don't have any time to get meaningful work done. And so the behavior that then happens is, people start hoarding information, people stop collaborating, people
Mm.
start, like, it becomes survival mode because you've spent all day in meetings. And then when it comes time to actually get the real meaningful work done that people want to do, they have a tiny amount of time to get it done in. So it's like, I'm just going to put my head down and get my work done. I'm not going to ask anybody for anything. I'm not going to collaborate. So these, like, so there are other ways. I do think that we, an area that is hugely ripe for disruption is meetings.
Yeah.
And so I would do a meeting audit. Like, if you have a team of, 10 people, and all 10 of you, outside of, like, your regular team check-ins, and all 10 of you are attending the same meetings on a regular basis, why aren't
Why?
two of you attending and updating the rest of the team by
Mm.
some
Good
other
point.
means, right? So I think there's a lot of things that we can do as leaders. Now, granted, everybody's going to say, Jen, this is great, but this too takes me time. And as a leader, I'm already overwhelmed. So I get that, and it's fair. But is the longer the result of making the time to do these things is that it lifts the burden and the overwhelm
Yeah.
from both you and your team. And so there's a lot of tools and actions that you can take along those lines, because we can't always control the broader systems, but all of us have some
Mm.
sort of span of control. And so look at what you can control and
Yep.
how you can, and what changes can you make. And oh, by the way, make changes. And if they don't work, or they make things worse, or it's just, like, not doesn't work out, like, good, okay, we tried it. Like, what's next?
Yeah, and I think that's a mindset in my last role before the one I'm in. I really learned to really truly believe in and act on because most things that we did weren't impacting anybody's safety or
Right.
impacting, anything that was a quote unquote life or death decision. I said, look, we're going to try this and we may fall on our face. And if we
Yep.
do, then check
We'll
that
learn
off the
something from
list
it.
and we'll figure out how to pivot and do it differently.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and but also that gives people permission to, like, try and quote unquote fail, if that's what you want to call it. But also it gives, especially when you start to kind of look at meetings and tell people that not everybody needs to be a part of every meeting. I think as a leader, it's important to model that behavior. So I think you also need to stop being a part of every meeting, right? So you got to give permission, but you also got to tell them, like, we also have to show them that you mean it. But I think when you start giving these permissions to the team, again, like you don't have to do this all yourself. If you like, I think teams would be overjoyed if their leader came to them and said, "Look, we have way too many meetings and we need to rethink this." And not all of us need to
Yeah.
be on every meeting. I want you
Yeah.
guys to have free time during your day where you can focus,
Yep.
where you can get work done, where you can think. Like I think every team on the face of the earth would be like, "Oh my God, are you joking?"
Yeah, but I just had an epiphany while you were talking. I have a plaque somewhere where in my office that says I've got this, but I think it should be changed to we've got this
Yeah.
versus the I to the we. I think it's a pretty powerful shift.
Yeah, yeah. So don't feel like you have to solve all these because if you try to solve it on your own, the truth is you're not going to get it right because you're not having the same experience that your team is. Let's just if you're the leader of a team, your experience, you might be as overwhelmed, but your experience is different.
Yep.
And so giving them that permission and that agency to say like, hey, I think we should change this and actually trying it. That's the pathways and possibilities thinking. Just you go down a path. If it doesn't work, great. We have another path.
I love that. Well, speaking of pathways, I think you speak a lot about well-being being a system, not a perk. So for leaders that are listening who wanted to do better but don't know where to start, and maybe
Yeah.
you've answered some of these, but what are one or two small human actions that actually makes a difference? And we may have covered some of them already.
Yeah, we have, but let me explain what I mean by that. And so all of the research will tell you that the top three, four, five things that are impacting people's well-being at work is not whether or not your company provides a meditation app for people. And so, where we went wrong, and I say we in the, workplace well-being industry was early on, it was about programs and perks and training, and all of those things are still very important, but they're foundational and to really achieve the ROI on the spend of those things, there's an and. And so people kind of, I'm not making fun of a meditation app. If you use a meditation app and it works for you, that's great. But I think what happened was we spent a whole bunch of money on programs and perks, and we checked a box and said, we've got workplace well-being. And then leaders would come to me and they'd be like, but Jen, everybody still says that everything about work sucks. Like, what's going on here? And so, number
Mm.
one, the meditation app was never designed to fix kind of workplace problems in terms of like culture and overwhelm and work overload.
Mm.
It might, meditation is really, really personally beneficial and it can potentially really help you with some of the overwhelm and how you approach things and, your own mental mindset, but it's not going to solve the problems that we're seeing. And so the number one, two, three things that are impacting people's well-being at work is definitely workload. Number
Yep.
two is like flow and design of work, which is what you and I were just talking about. If you spend 8 hours, if you look at your calendar and you're in 8 hours or even 6 hours of back to back to back meetings, there's
Oh, it's
something,
exhausting.
yeah, and there's something wrong with the design of work because most of the time you're in meetings and you say three or four words. And the rest of the time you're just listening to like
Yeah,
three
and I
other
don't think
people
you're
talk.
present either
You're
most
not
of the time.
present
I
because you're
mean, I'm the
multitasking.
world's worst at multitasking on meetings, so I'm not
Yeah.
talking about anybody here, but I
So
think
that's
everybody
a
does that.
yeah, that's a huge signal that like there's something wrong with the design of work. Why are we spending all of this time in meetings when they're not? If you're multitasking in a meeting, you might as well hang up because you obviously don't believe that that meeting is important enough for your presence. And if it's not important enough for your presence, have someone send you the notes afterwards and take 5 minutes and read through the meeting notes and now you're up to date. But you don't need to be on that call, right? And so design and flow of work. And then the third thing is, relationship. So relationship with my direct manager and with my direct teammates. My direct manager and my teammates have the biggest effect on my mental health on a day in, day out basis. There's research that says more so than my partner or my therapist.
I think that's really interesting. So I've spent most of my life in big fortune, like bigger, larger companies. And so I've interviewed a lot in my day, and I get the question, well, what's the culture like at insert company name
Yeah.
here? And I want to tell them I can't answer that question because I can tell you what the culture is like in my bubble, so to say,
Mhm.
but I can't tell you what the culture is like if you go like one function over.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's we talk about those as kind of like microcultures, right?
Right.
Every team has, and this is true in academia, this is true in communities, this is true in any large group of people, right? And so it really is, I mean, that was true at Deloitte, right? I mean, you could be on a team where the culture was amazing, and then you switch to another team and you're like, oh my God, what just happened?
Yeah. My
Like you
best
feel
friend and
like,
I went through that. She
yeah,
was in one team and in the same company I was in, and the story she told me, I was like, if I didn't know you like I know you, I would swear that you're making this up.
yeah.
Like this doesn't even sound like the same company.
Yeah. So you asked me like what are one or two things that leaders can do? Well, we've talked about a handful of them, but other things, when it comes to workload, do, sit down with your team. And, I used to do a, start, stop, continue exercise every single quarter. Like, okay, we have these three new projects that we have to start. What are three things that we're going to stop doing that we no longer need to be doing? What are the things that we're going to continue doing that we've been doing, right? And so doing kind of these real assessments and these real audits of where we are, because we get into, especially in large organizations, we get into these cycles of just adding more. We never take away.
Do
We
you
just
work for my
add.
company? No, I'm kidding. I'm joking.
It's every company, right?
It
Like
is.
it's, so we just add without subtracting. And so and even if you're like, "Oh, Jen, but like the things that I could subtract are small and insignificant." You might think that, but sometimes subtracting the small things that you think are small and insignificant have the biggest impact because it's just the action of saying like, hey, we can actually take something away.
Yeah, sometimes it's mental load.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, mental cognitive load is huge and kind of just understanding what everybody is carrying and like saying, hey, you could stop carrying that now. It is huge, right? We talked about kind of design and flow of work and meetings. And, I think one thing that leaders can also do is think about your own style. We talked about thinking about where your barrier, but thinking about your own communication style. I learned this lesson. I'm kind of that. So I think what happens with all of us, not just leaders, is like we have so much on our plate and we have something and we want to get it off our plate and onto someone else's plate. And we just fire off an email. And we don't really, again, you need to stop for a moment and kind of think about the person on the other end. As their
Mm.
leader, you should kind of know what they're working on, what's on their plate, where they generally are. And if you're like constantly firing off like stream of consciousness emails, if you're that person, because I was that person, and to some extent I still am, because I'm that person that's like, oh, I have this great thought. I don't want to lose it, right? So what I've started doing is instead of emailing the other person, I email myself. And
Oh,
then
interesting.
and then when I have the time to kind of sit down and either write a coherent email that, is going to explain something to someone, or I set up a call with them and say like, hey, need 15 minutes. I want to talk through something with you. So, but what I used to do was like, I would just fire it off. I'd be like, Shannon, blah, 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 blah. And you would get it and you'd be like, I don't know what this means. It makes me really anxious. What's wrong with her? Or like, hey, can you never send somebody a message that's like, hey, can you talk? That's
Yeah,
it,
that's
ever.
a bad one, especially if you're a leader and you're sending it to somebody that
Somebody,
works
yeah,
for you. That's the
in this,
worst.
the
Yeah, yeah.
worst, right? And so
Don't do that.
yeah, thinking about how you communicate things and how that's going to land. And so that does require you to step back and say, like, hold on a second. So that's why I said, you know what? I don't want to lose this thought, but I'm going to send it to myself because if I overwhelm myself, it's nobody's fault but my own, but I
Yeah.
shouldn't overwhelm my people.
Yeah, love that. Well, we've touched on it a couple of times that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and many of our listeners, probably most of them, are women, and they tend to be carrying a lot: work,
Mm.
family, caregiving, leadership, all the things, all the expectations. What do you wish more women gave themselves permission to release?
All of it. I mean, look, I think um, I would say guilt, but I think it's more than that. The belief and the feeling that who we are right now in this moment is is not enough. Like we
Mm,
always believe that what we're doing is not enough because we live in a world that is constantly telling us that we're not enough, and that and we look around and we see people's highlight reel of their life, and we compare ourselves to that, and that makes us feel like we don't have enough, or we're far behind, or and so I think what was a really pivotal moment, and I talk about this in my TED talk, was for a long time, I was living by a definition of success that was literally everybody else's definition of success. Like I
mm,
would look at people inside of my organization and be like, oh, she's really successful. I'm going to copy what I think she's doing, not what she's doing, but what I perceive her to be doing. And then I'll be successful too, right? And so I had no definition of success other than the perception of what everybody else was doing. And ultimately, that's probably what contributed in a big way to my burnout because I didn't have an internal compass of like, hey, you know what? Success for me is not working 80 hours a week. For me, success is working 45 hours a week and, doing, going to, knitting club or book club or, doing these things with my kids, right? So I think
mm.
we have forgotten that success is more than about work.
Yeah, and more than a title. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
more
the
than
one
a
that got me for
title,
a
more
long
than,
time.
yeah, and we don't live in a society that regularly reinforces that. And so we
Mm,
need to reinforce it for each other. In the book I talk about, hope grows in community. And so
mm.
when you're struggling, call your best friend. And just be like, look, I'm feeling like this right now. Like I'm not enough. Like, but yeah, but let it go. If you have, that terrorist inside your head, like I do, tell her to shut up and sit down.
Yep.
And just remember that you're enough because you're here.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I have
that,
her
and
named.
yeah, yeah. I just call her. It starts with a B. I don't know if I'm allowed to say
Yeah.
those words on this
Yeah, I get it.
podcast, but
Yeah.
she doesn't have an
Yeah,
actual
I'll make
name.
the
But
audience laugh. So I'm going to tell my age here, but I don't know if anybody's ever watched Designing Women. I mean, it was a show and there were four women on that show. They
yeah,
were very different, but they were either ran or part of a design agency. And I've named her Suzanne,
there you
Suzanne for
go. Yeah,
Suzanne Sugar Baker on that show
yeah,
because she was the beauty queen. Everything had to be perfect, and that's the voice in my head. That's
yeah,
the voice I don't like.
yeah. So we tell Suzanne to shut up and sit down.
Yeah. It even has a nice ring to it. So
Yeah.
I can't believe this, Jen. This has been the best conversation and more I actually really needed this conversation today. Um, to close this out, if you could leave our listeners with one or multiple pieces of advice, some reminder that they can carry into their work and life this month, what would you want them to remember?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I feel like we've covered, so many of them. I think that, and I talk about this in the book. I think, what many of us are experiencing right now, I think that burnout is real, but I think what more of us are experiencing is hopelessness.
I agree.
And we're feeling hopeless about our ability to make tomorrow better than today. And
Mm,
so I want to, and I talk about this in detail in the book, I want to remind people or tell people that hope and hopelessness can coexist. And
mm,
actually, the way out of hopelessness is cultivating small moments of hope. And so when you're feeling overwhelmed, burnt out, like you're not enough, whatever it is, identify the very next step you can take. And don't identify the next 10. Don't identify the entire plan. What's the very next step that I can take to continue to move forward and make it the smallest step that you can possibly make it? Like, don't make it, I'm gonna, train for a marathon and run it in a month.
Yeah. I'm
Just
going to go out and walk around the block
right.
tonight
I'm
after
gonna walk
work,
one
right?
block and come back. And then
Yeah.
tomorrow I'm gonna walk 2 blocks and come back, right? That's what I mean when I say, and that is how you cultivate and grow hope.
Mm,
Because okay, I did it. I did it today. I was able to get away from my desk and walk that block. And then I was able to get away from my desk and walk 2 blocks, right? And that's how we grow hope in our lives. And I
mm.
think that is the path forward, because we often, I think, especially as women, believe that we have to change the world in one fell swoop, and nobody ever changed the world in one fell swoop. It was many many years and many many people in the making,
Yeah.
that drove.
We may have seen it in a moment, a series of moments, but there was a whole long years that probably led up to
a
that.
100%. So yeah, so
Yep.
just what's the smallest step that I can take.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Jen, where can people pick up a copy of your book? When I can't
They
remember when it's being released.
It was already released. So it
Awesome.
was released at the end of January. So it
Okay.
is available now anywhere where you buy books. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, your local bookshop. Everybody has different preferences. It's
Right.
available also in audiobook. I narrated that myself, which was
Oh,
really
you were my
interesting.
best friend. I'm like, I want to read this book, but I'm the weirdest reader. I like somebody to read to me, so I want the book in my hand and the audio in my ear. So that's fantastic
Well, there you
news.
go. The audiobook has a special chapter that's not actually included in the hard copy. So you will
Oh,
get access to that. But you can find me also on LinkedIn, and I have a Substack newsletter called Thoughts on Being Well. So those are the best places. Thank you for asking that.
awesome. Awesome. Well, Jen, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for the blessing of your time and for what you're doing for the world. It's bringing us all a way to be hopeful and a way that changes us and is impactful. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for this great conversation.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of Mental Health Awareness Month and stay safe and be hopeful. I'll see you all later. As we wrap up today's conversation, one of Jen's insights really stayed with me. She said, real hope requires action. And that idea, it feels especially powerful during Mental Health Awareness Month because hope, it's not about pretending everything is fine. It is not about ignoring the challenges or pushing through the exhaustion with a smile. Real hope is something much more grounded, more centered. It's choosing a direction, it's finding a pathway forward. And sometimes it is simply taking the next small step, even when the path it isn't perfectly clear. That idea actually connects to the work of psychologist C.R. Snyder, whose groundbreaking research on hope reminds us that hope grows when we have three things: a goal, a pathway to reach it, and the belief that we can move forward. In other words, hope is not passive, it's something we practice. So here's a small invitation for you this week. Think about one area of your life or leadership where things feel a little stuck or overwhelming. What is one small step you can take toward the future you want to create? Not the perfect step, just the next one. And speaking of taking meaningful steps forward, if you're looking for a community that believes in lifting women up and creating real momentum in industry, I highly encourage you to explore Empowering Women in Industry. This incredible community, it brings together women across manufacturing, engineering, construction, and the skilled trades to connect, grow, and support one another as leaders in our fields. Whether it's through membership, virtual events, or in person gatherings, the goal is simple: create spaces where women can learn from each other, champion one another, and build the future of industry together. One event I'm especially excited about is the Empowering Women in Industry Carolinas Conference. It is happening July 9th in Greenville, South Carolina. It is going to be an energizing day filled with connection, inspiration, and practical insights from women who are shaping the future of industry. We'll include links in the show notes so you can explore the community, upcoming events, and details about the Carolinas Conference. As we close out our episode today, I want to leave you with some powerful words from C.R. Snyder. He said, "Hope is the sum of the mental willpower and the way power that you have for your goals." So wherever you are on your journey right now, just keep moving forward. Even the smallest step can spark meaningful change. Thank you for being part of this growing community of women who are learning, leading, and lifting each other up across all industries. Until next time, lead human and ignite your fire within.